My house is quiet every morning, with only the old clock counting down the seconds and the occasional creak of the floorboards. This house remembers better times when Howard, my husband, was alive, when little Parian ran through the hallways. Now it's just an old woman's house, too big for one, but filled with memories I'm not ready to leave behind. I sit in the kitchen with a cup of tea and pills lined up in rows. Heart pills, blood pressure pills, joint pills, my faithful companions at 78. I was once the chief accountant for the Greenville city government, a respected person whose opinion was listened to. Now, to most, I'm just an old woman who sometimes interferes with her relatives' lives. The phone rings, breaking the silence. I know who it is without even looking at the screen. Mom, hi. Parian's voice sounds fake cheerful. How are you today? Hello, son. Same as usual, I answer, putting aside the book I was reading. Listen, Delilah and I wanted to stop by today. Do you have time? Of course I have time. I always have time for my only son. Except he doesn't usually ask unless he needs something specific. Of course, I say. I'm not going anywhere. Great. We'll be there around 2. I know that tone. For 20 years, I've learned every tone with which Parian asks for money. It's not that he's a poor man. No, my son works as an insurance appraiser, makes a decent living. His wife Delilah is a travel agent for a small but popular firm. They live in a nice house, drive decent cars, but somehow they're always short. I go to the window and look out at my well-kept garden. The roses have just begun to bloom, creating bright spots among the greenery. Gardening is one of the few hobbies I have left. I used to love traveling. Howard and I dreamed of going around the world after we retired, but he died a year before I left my position in the administration, and traveling lost its meaning. Instead, I started saving money. Partly out of habit, we'd been saving with Howard all our lives to give Parian a good education. Partly out of fear of the future. Medical bills in old age could ruin anyone. But there was another reason I was embarrassed to admit even to myself. Those savings gave me a sense of security that had been sorely lacking since my husband's death. The doorbell rings at 2 o'clock sharp. Punctuality is another quality Parian only has when he needs something. Mom. He hugs me, too tight for a normal greeting. You look beautiful. Delilah stands behind him, her dyed blonde hair perfectly styled, a smile on her face. She's 12 years younger than Parian. She's 35 now. Sometimes I think she only married him because she thought I was rich and about to die. Hello, Louisa, she says, barely touching me in a hug. We brought you a pie. She holds out a supermarket box to me. Inside is probably the cheapest version they could find. Come in, I invite her in. The tea is ready. We sit in the living room. Parian and Delilah are on the couch, and I'm in my favorite chair. On the table between us are cups of tea and the store-bought cake, which turned out to be exactly as I'd expected. How are you doing? I ask, even though I know what's coming next. Actually, Mom, Parian begins, we're having a little trouble. Delilah picks up on it. You see, Louise, it's the off-season at the agency, not enough clients. And Parian's work has cut back on bonuses. I nod, taking a sip of tea. It's the same story every time, only the details change. There's house repairs, car trouble, unexpected bills. We need a little help with the house payment, Parian continues. It's only $2,000. We'll pay it back in a month, I promise. We both know he won't. He's borrowed almost $40,000 from me in the last 5 years and hasn't paid me back a dime. I stopped reminding him. It was just ruining our relationship, and I didn't want to lose my only son. Okay, I agreed. I'll wire the money tomorrow. Their faces brighten instantly. Delilah even smiles genuinely for the first time in the entire visit. You're really helping us out, Mom. Parian hugs me again. We are so grateful. Their gratitude lasts until the money is in their account. Then they forget about me until the next time they need something. After they leave, I call Ruth. Ruth Quinlan has been my best friend since high school. She's one of the few people who really cares about me. Have you come for money again? She asks as soon as she hears my voice. Yes, I sigh. 2,000 this time. Louise, you have to stop indulging them. They're taking advantage of your kindness. I know, Ruth, but he's my only son. Who only thinks of you when he needs money, Ruth said with barely contained irritation. You deserve better than that. Ruth has always been straightforward. She'd worked as a private detective when she was young, then opened the small agency her son now ran. She was never afraid to tell the truth, even if it was unpleasant. How about you? I'm changing the subject. How's your arthritis? I've been better, but I'm not complaining, she replies. Listen, I think I'm gonna come visit you one of these days. It's been a while. I'd be glad to, I say sincerely. I feel better after talking to Ruth. She was always able to cheer me up, even when she scolded me for my softness toward Perian. Deep down, I knew she was right. My son and his wife had long seen me as an ATM machine, not a person with feelings and needs. In the evening, while sorting through papers in the study, I find old photographs. Here's Perian at age 5, a wide smile on his face, holding the toy car that Howard and I gave him for his birthday. Here he is a senior in high school, so serious in his robe. Here we are at his wedding to Delilah. I noticed then how coldly she looked at me when she thought no one was watching. When exactly did everything change? When did my loving son turn into a man who only sees me as a source of money? Maybe after Howard died. Or when he married Delilah. Or did it happen gradually? So slowly that I didn't notice until it was too late. I wake up the next morning with a heaviness in my chest. At first, I think it's just an emotional consequence of yesterday's ruminations, but the pain doesn't go away. I take medication, but it only gets worse. Nevertheless, I decide not to go to the doctor. It's probably nothing serious, it's just age. 2 days later, Ruth arrives. She notices at once that something is wrong. You don't look well, she says, scrutinizing me. What hurts? Nothing much, I said, trying to dismiss it. It's just my heart sometimes. How long has it been? A few days. And you certainly haven't been to the doctor, I say. Not a question, but a statement. I smile guiltily. Ruth shakes her head. Louise, you're impossible. I have to see a doctor. I'll make an appointment tomorrow, I promise. We spend the afternoon together, reminiscing about old times, discussing books and TV series. Ruth is always easy. She doesn't ask for anything. She just gives her time and attention. When she leaves, I feel a little better, though the pain in my chest hasn't gone away. In the evening, Perian calls. Mom, did you transfer the money? He asks without greeting. Yes, son, 2 days ago. Oh, right. Sorry, I didn't notice. He doesn't even try to hide the lie. How are you feeling? Fine, I answer automatically, though the pain in my chest is getting worse. Good. Listen, Delilah and I are thinking about going on vacation. We haven't been away in a while, a vacation, with my money, which I supposedly needed for a house payment, typical. I hope you have a good vacation, I say, trying not to show my disappointment. Thanks, Mom. Okay, I've got to run. Take care of yourself. He hangs up without even waiting for my response. I sit staring at the phone in my hand and feel the pain in my chest become unbearable. The room begins to spin before my eyes, and it becomes harder and harder to breathe. The last thing I remember before I pass out is the thought that Perian might not even immediately notice if something happened to me. To him, I only exist when I need money. The white ceiling, the smell of medicine, and the steady beeping of instruments were the first things I realized when I came to. My thoughts were jumbled, my head was a fog. Trying to move caused a sharp pain in my chest. Don't move, please, a man's voice said from somewhere nearby. I turned my head and saw a man in a white coat. Dr. Morrison, as it turned out later. What's wrong? My voice sounded hoarse, like I hadn't spoken in days. You had a heart attack, Mrs. Hemmings. You were brought here by ambulance. It's a good thing your neighbor saw something wrong with you in time. Neighbor. So it was Elizabeth who called the ambulance. She used to check on me in the evenings, make sure I was okay. How long have I been here? Almost 24 hours. We put you in an induced coma to relieve the strain on your heart. It was critical, but you're stable now. I tried to make sense of what I heard. Heart attack, coma, I could have died. We notified your family, Doctor, Morrison continued. Your son was here. Said he'd be back later. Perian came by. At least that. When will I be discharged? I asked. Dr. Morrison sighed. Mrs. Hemmings, we've done an examination. You have a serious heart problem. You will need long-term treatment and possibly surgery. We can't let you go anytime soon. That news hit harder than the heart attack itself. I had always been independent, Even at the age of 78, I managed my own household, tended the garden, went shopping. And now I was going to be in hospital for an indefinite period of time. I know it's hard to accept, the doctor's voice softened. But believe me, it's for your own good. What you need now is rest and medical attention. He left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The room was small but bright. The window overlooked the hospital park, where patients and visitors strolled leisurely. A couple hours later, the nurse came in with lunch. The hospital food was as tasteless as I'd expected, but I forced myself to eat at least a little. I needed to get my strength up. After lunch, Ruth came into the room. Her face was both relieved and angry. "You're awake at last," she said, sitting down beside the bed. "I almost freaked out when I got the call that you were in the hospital." "I'm sorry I made you worry." I smiled guiltily. "You should have gone to the doctor as soon as you felt the pain." Ruth's voice was tearful. "You promised you'd go to the doctor." "I was going to. Tomorrow." Ruth shook her head. "Your tomorrow almost cost you your life. The doctor said if you'd been brought in an hour later, we wouldn't be talking right now." I didn't say anything. What could I say? That I was too stubborn? That I didn't want to bother anyone with my problems? That deep down I thought no one would care if anything happened to me? "Did Perian come?" Ruth asked after a pause. "The doctor said he had, but I didn't see him. He was here for 5 minutes. He asked how serious it was, and then he left." "Said he had an important meeting," Ruth said with contempt. "More important than his mother in the hospital." I felt a stab of pain, but not physical. What had I expected, though? Perian had always been like that, busy when it came to me, and always free when he needed something. "He's got a job," I defended my son in a machine-like voice. "He can't leave everything." "Stop making excuses for him, Louise." Ruth took my hand. "He's a grown man who should take care of his mother, especially when she's in the hospital after a heart attack." I didn't argue. I was too tired for that. Ruth sat with me through the evening, telling me the latest news, sharing gossip, trying to distract me from my gloomy thoughts. When it was time for the visitation to end, she promised to come back tomorrow. "Do you want me to bring you anything from home?" she asked at the door. "A book from the bedside table and maybe my old robe. Hospital shirts are so uncomfortable." "Oh, okay. I'll stop by your house tomorrow morning and bring everything you need." After Ruth left, I felt incredibly lonely. The room felt cold and alien, despite the staff's attempts to make it cozy. I tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Thoughts about the future, about the long treatment, about the possible surgery kept me awake. The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of the door opening. I expected to see a nurse, but Perian was standing on the doorstep, alone without Delilah. "Mom." He walked over to the bed and kissed me awkwardly on the cheek. "How are you feeling?" "I've been better," I answered honestly. "But the doctors say I'm on the mend." "That's good." He sat back in his chair, avoiding my eyes. "I came by yesterday, but you were still unconscious." "I know. Thanks for coming." There was an awkward pause. Perian was clearly feeling out of sorts. Finally, he cleared his throat and said, "Listen, Mother, Dr. Morrison said you need a long treatment." "Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And maybe surgery." "Yeah. They say you won't be able to live alone for a while after you're discharged. That's it." Now I see where he's going with this. "Delilah and I thought," Perian continued, "that you might need some supervision. Maybe you should think about a nursing home." I felt a lump come up in my throat. A nursing home. Get rid of my old mom, hide her away, keep her out of the way. "I don't want to go to a nursing home," I said firmly. "I want to go home." "But how will you live alone? You need constant care." "I'll hire a nurse if I have to." "It's expensive, Mom. I have savings." He was silent for a moment, and then he asked casually, "Speaking of savings, I'll need to pay your bills while you're here. Where do you keep the money?" That's it, the real reason for his visit. "In the bank, of course," I replied. "But don't worry about that. Ruth will help me with the payments." "Ruth?" His face contorted with irritation. "Mom, I'm your son. I'm supposed to take care of your affairs, not strangers." "Ruth is not an outsider. She's been my closest friend for 60 years. Still, it's a family matter." I sighed. He won't back down. "In my desk at home is a file folder. It has everything I need. His face brightened up. That's great. I'll come by today and take care of everything. Don't worry about a thing. I'll take care of everything. I'm sure he will. Especially my money. Perian left 15 minutes later, saying he had to work. On the doorstep, he ran into Ruth, who was carrying my things out of the house. They exchanged cold greetings. What did he want? Ruth asked as soon as the door closed behind him. Money as usual, I said tiredly. He said he would pay my bills while I was here. Asked me where I kept the money. And did you? I said the papers were in the desk. Didn't say anything about a savings book. Ruth nodded. She knew about my main bank account, where my pension went, and my secret account, where I kept my main savings, almost $200,000, accumulated over a lifetime. That's right. Don't trust him on this one. We spent the afternoon together. Ruth helped me change into my robe, brushed my hair, read aloud to me. When she left, I felt much better. The next day, Perian came with Delilah. They brought flowers and fruit, obviously to impress the nurses. We were so worried, Delilah wailed falsely, barely touching me in a hug. How are you, honey? Getting better, I replied shortly. We've gone over your paperwork, Perian said, and we've already paid your house and utility bills. Thank you. I tried to sound grateful, even though I knew they weren't looking out for me. But we noticed that you don't have much money in your main account, he continued, trying to sound concerned. Only a few thousand. That might not be enough for long-term treatment. I have health insurance, I reminded him. Yes, but it doesn't cover everything. What if I need surgery or rehab? Or a nursing home? I told you I'm not going to a nursing home. But where's your life savings? Delilah asked the question straight up, no bullshit. You've always been frugal. There must be some savings. Everything I have is in that account you saw, I lied, looking her straight in the eye. They looked at each other. I could see they didn't believe me. Maybe you just forgot, Perian insisted. At your age, that's normal. At my age, I repeated bitterly, I still remember perfectly well where my money is kept. They didn't bring it up in front of me again, but I could see them whispering in the corner of the room, glaring at me. They were up to something, that's for sure. They visited me every day for a week. They always brought something, fruit, magazines, home-cooked meals that I'm sure Delilah didn't make. But all their visits were short and drawn out, as if performing an unpleasant duty. Ruth came every day too, usually after them. One day she came with alarming news. Louise, they're searching your house, she said, lowering her voice even though we were alone. I went to pick up your pajamas and saw that the study was all overturned. Drawers pulled out, papers strewn about. I closed my eyes. I knew it. They're looking for my savings book. Exactly. Are you sure they won't find it? Absolutely. It's in a safety deposit box. Only I and you, as my trustee, have access to it. Ruth breathed a sigh of relief. Good, but still, it's outrageous. They go through your things while you're helpless here. On my 10th day in the hospital, I noticed Perian and Delilah's strange behavior. They came in later than usual, both excited, as if they were struggling to contain some secret. We found a great rehab clinic, Perian announced. It's in Great Neck. They have excellent facilities and excellent specialists. I'm not going to Great Neck, I said calmly. I'm going home. But Mom, you need care. I'll get a nurse and Ruth will help. That old hag, Delilah began, but Perian touched her arm warningly. Mother, be reasonable. You can't be alone. I will not be alone. I will hire help. And how will you pay for that help? Delilah couldn't take it anymore. You don't have that kind of money. Delilah, Perian shouted at her. No, I can't pretend anymore. She turned to me. Louise, we know you have money. We found the bank statements, 200,000, and you've been hiding it from us all these years. I went cold. They couldn't find a savings book, but they must have stumbled across some old bank statements I kept in the house. This money is for my treatment and care, I said firmly. Not for your entertainment. You won't be able to spend it anyway, Delilah smirked. In your condition? That's enough, Perian interrupted her. Mom, we just want to make sure you're taken care of properly, and now we must go. There's much to do. They left faster than usual. I lay staring at the ceiling and felt something was wrong. Something in their behavior made me uneasy. This sudden interest in the clinic at Great Neck, the mention of my savings, the hurried departure. Ruth came in the evening. I told her about the strange visit. They're up to something, she said, frowning. I can feel it in my gut. Maybe I'm just suspicious. They've been acting strange, but it could be anything. No, there's something wrong. I'll stop by your house tomorrow and see if everything's all right. The next day, Ruth came in with a bag full of things. They're going on a trip, she said without preamble. I saw them loading the suitcases into the car. Big suitcases, Louise. Maybe just a vacation, I suggested uncertainly. Perian said they wanted to go somewhere. While you're in the hospital. Ruth shook her head. No, it's something else. I'll try to find out. After a couple of days, my condition improved enough that the doctors allowed me short walks in the hallway. Perian and Delilah hadn't shown up in 3 days, which was unusual even for them. I was starting to worry, though I was angry at myself for it. Why am I still worrying about people who clearly don't care about me? The nurse brought me the cell phone I'd left at home. Ruth picked it up and charged it. There are a few missed calls, she said, and some messages. I turned the phone on. Indeed, several missed calls from unknown numbers, probably commercials, and one message from Perian sent yesterday. Opening it, I felt the room begin to spin. Ruth took me under her arm and helped me sit up on the bed. What is it? She asked anxiously. I silently showed her my cell phone. There was a message on the screen. We've flown away, taking all your money. Bye. I couldn't believe my eyes as I reread the message over and over again. We flew away, taking all your money. Bye. Such a short sentence, but there was so much contempt, so much gloating in it. My own son. He couldn't have done it, I whispered, though I knew in my heart that he could have. Ruth stared at the screen of my phone, her face growing angry. She paused, holding back a swear word. How dare he? His own mother when she's in the hospital. Before I could answer, my phone beeped, announcing another message. From Delilah this time. A picture and a text. The picture showed them both, Perian and Delilah, sitting in the airplane seats with glasses of champagne in their hands. Wide smiles, shining eyes. The caption read, Thanks for the sponsorship, Grandma. You're finally good for something. I was shaken, not from fear for the money, but from the realization of how little I meant to my only child. Just a source of money, not even a person. Louise, breathe. Ruth shook me by the shoulders. Breathe deeply. That's it. I took a deep breath, then another. Gradually, the trembling subsided, but there was an emptiness inside, as if everything that had made me alive had been scraped away. How did they get the money? Ruth asked. I thought you said the savings book was in a safety deposit box. It's just the savings book, I said quietly. The bank card is at home in the box. I thought it was safer than carrying it around. And the PIN code, I closed my eyes. The PIN number was written in my diary, disguised as a phone number. Had they emptied the entire account? With shaky hands, I logged into the banking app. It took me several tries to get the password right. When the screen finally loaded, I froze. Instead of almost $200,000, I had $3.27 in my account. That's it, I whispered. They'd taken everything. Ruth cursed, harshly, bitterly, not at all old lady-like. There was so much rage in her words that for a second I was relieved. At least someone was really angry about what had happened to me. We need to call the police, she said firmly, pulling out her phone. No, I grabbed her arm. Don't call the police. Why not? Louise, this is grand larceny. It's my son. I knew how pathetic it sounded, but I couldn't help it. And I've given him money before. The police will think I just changed my mind. This is different. You gave him small amounts of money willingly, and now he's stolen all your savings while you're in the hospital. I shook my head. No police, please. Ruth looked at me carefully, then slowly put the phone away. Okay, whatever you say. But this is wrong, Louise. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to write a statement about my own son. No matter how terrible a man he was, I still remembered him as the little boy who had once loved me. You know what? Ruth sat down next to me and took my hand. Let's go without the police. But that doesn't mean we won't do anything. What do you mean? Remember I told you I used to be a private detective? Of course you did. You were always proud of it. Well, Ruth's eyes took on a dangerous gleam. Some skills are not forgotten. Neither do connections. I looked at her puzzled. What do you suggest? Well, for starters, find out exactly where they went. Judging by the fact that they took all the money with them, they're obviously planning a long trip, probably not even thinking about coming back. That's something I hadn't considered. Really, why come back when they've stolen everything they can? They have no reason to show up in Greenville again. Okay, so how do you know where they're going? I asked. I still have people I know at the airport. I'll make some calls. Ruth left the room, and I was alone with my thoughts. The realization came in waves. 200,000, all my savings accumulated over decades of working, saving, denying myself small pleasures. Money that was supposed to ensure a peaceful old age, to pay my medical bills if necessary, to allow me to live with dignity for the rest of my days. All of this was now in the hands of two heartless people who didn't even see fit to pretend to be grateful. I felt tears coming to my throat, but I held them back with an effort of will. No, I wouldn't cry. Not for the money, and certainly not for them. They don't deserve my tears. Ruth returned half an hour later, her eyes shining with excitement. Hawaii, she announced. They were going to Hawaii. A flight from New York to Honolulu, first class. How did you know that? My friend Helen works in the reservation system. Parian didn't try very hard to cover his tracks. Booked the tickets in his name, paid with his card. So what now? Ruth sat down next to me and lowered her voice as if she was afraid we'd be overheard. Now we punish them. Something in her tone made me wary. Ruth, I don't want any, illegal action. She laughed. Nothing illegal, I promise. We'll just make their vacation a nightmare. And then we'll get your money back. But how? Remember my nephew Edwin? He's been living in Hawaii for 15 years. He works at a big hotel in Honolulu as a security manager. He has great connections all over the island. I vaguely remembered Edwin as a tall, thin guy with a perpetual smile on his face. Ruth was very proud of him. What could he do? For starters, find out exactly where our thieves were staying. It's not hard to find out where the thieves were staying. With that kind of money, they must have chosen one of the best hotels. And then, she smiled enigmatically, it would be more interesting. At that moment, Dr. Morrison entered the room. Ruth immediately stopped talking and assumed an innocent look. How are we feeling today, Mrs. Hemmings? He asked, checking the readings on the monitor. A little better, I answered, though it was far from the truth. That's good. Your vitals are stable, which is a good sign. If this continues, we can talk about discharge in a week. So soon? I was surprised. But you talked about long-term treatment. Long-term treatment doesn't necessarily mean staying in the hospital all the time. You'll have to come in regularly for treatments and medications, but with proper care at home, you can recover there. After the doctor left, Ruth looked at me thoughtfully. If you're discharged, where will you go? Home? I didn't answer right away. The thought of returning to an empty house, where every corner reminded me of my son's betrayal, was unbearable. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if I could live there after everything. Then move in with me, Ruth said firmly. I have a big house and plenty of room. When you're fully recovered, you'll decide what to do next. I was touched by her suggestion. Ruth had lived alone since her husband had died 10 years ago. Her children were long gone. A son in Chicago, a daughter in Los Angeles. They visited her a couple times a year, but mostly she managed on her own. Thank you, I said sincerely. I'll think about it. There's nothing to think about. It's settled. Ruth was always like that, straightforward and decisive. Now let's get back to our thieves. I'm going to call Edwin and tell him the situation. She left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Despite the horror of the situation, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if the heavy mask I had worn for years had finally fallen away, revealing my son's true face. No more pretending that our relationship was normal. No longer did I have to justify his actions. He had made his choice, and that choice freed me from having to continue this game. Ruth returned an hour later, her face glowing with excitement. Edwin's on the line, she said, sitting down beside me. He's already started the search. From my description of Parian and Delilah, plus the approximate time of their arrival, He'll be able to trace the hotel where they're staying. And then what? I still had my doubts about the whole thing. Then we turned their luxurious vacation into a nightmare, Ruth said, a predatory glint in her eyes. Nothing illegal, like I promised. It's just, a series of very unpleasant coincidences. I wanted to ask more, but Ruth's phone rang. Yes, Edwin, already? Great. She listened, nodding, and occasionally jotting something down in her notebook. Her face grew more and more pleased. Thank you, nephew. You're a real treasure. Yes, the plan remains the same. Keep me posted. She hung up and turned to me. They're staying at the Royal Hawaiian, one of the most expensive hotels on the island. They got a suite with an ocean view. And according to their reservations, they're planning on staying there for a month. I felt my insides tighten. A month in a luxury hotel. With my money. Money that I had worked so long and hard to earn. What now? I asked, surprised at the sudden firmness in my voice. Now comes the best part. Ruth leaned closer. Edwin knows the manager at the Royal Hawaiian. They've arranged that strange things will begin to happen to our lovebirds' room. Strange things. What kind of things? Minor inconveniences, for starters. An air conditioner that goes on and off. A TV that changes channels spontaneously. Food they didn't order. Calls in the middle of the night. Nothing criminal, just, annoying little things. I imagine Perian and Delilah waking up in the middle of the night to a call no one made. How they complain about the service and the staff hands up their arms. It's okay, you think. How their perfect vacation gradually turns into a series of small but infuriating annoyances. And I smiled, for the first time in days. And then? I asked, feeling the fire of revenge flare up inside me. Then the second phase begins. Ruth looked like a general planning a military operation. Edwin would accidentally find their credit cards in a public place, as if they'd lost them. And like an honest citizen will block them. Can he do that? Easily. All he has to do is call the bank and tell them he found someone else's cards. The bank will immediately block them for security purposes, and our lovebirds will suddenly be destitute. But they must have cash. Of course they do, but it'll run out fast, especially in Hawaii where everything's expensive. And they can't get new cards sent to them because they're not at home. A plan was beginning to emerge, and to my surprise, I found that I liked it. It was not a cruel revenge, but rather a just retribution. The third stage, Ruth went on, will begin when they try to withdraw cash from a bank or money changer. Edwin knows the right people. They will be told that their accounts have been frozen because of suspected fraud. They can just call their bank and find out. They could, but it'll take time, especially with the time difference between Hawaii and the mainland. And while they're figuring it out, we'll move on to step 4, which is they'll be evicted from the hotel. It'll be discovered that there's something wrong with the card they used to pay for their reservation. It's probably stolen. Ruth winked at me. And they'll have to find a new place to stay, with no money, in one of the most expensive resorts in the world. I was beginning to realize the genius of the plan. It seemed like a chain of mishaps and coincidences. Nothing illegal, nothing that could be directly linked to us. What if they decide to go home? I asked. That would be difficult without papers. Ruth answered cryptically. Without papers? Step 5. Their passports and return tickets would be lost. Perhaps they'll be stolen from the room safe, or they'll forget them somewhere. Ruth, that sounds like nothing illegal, she said firmly. Just creating unfavorable conditions. Whatever happens next will be the result of their own actions and decisions. I wondered. The plan seemed complicated and risky, but at the same time, fair. They stole my money, thinking they could get away with it. Why not show them that there are consequences to such actions? How do we get the money back? I asked, determined. That's the hardest part, Ruth admitted. But I have an idea. When they find themselves in a desperate situation with no money, no papers, evicted from their hotel, they need help. And then my nephew Edwin shows up, like a good Samaritan, minus I, and he offers them a way out. A simple contract. They return the money, and in return, they get help to get their papers back and go home. And if they refuse, then their only option is to go to the police. but they wouldn't want to have to explain where they got $200,000 in cash. The plan was risky, but elegant in its simplicity. Get Perian and Delilah into a position where the only reasonable thing to do was to return the stolen goods. Okay, I said after a long pause. Let's give it a try. Ruth brightened. Great, I'll call Edwin right away and tell him to get started. She left the room again, and I was left to ponder everything that had happened. A week ago, I was just a lonely old woman being used by my own son. Now I felt different, like waking up from a long sleep. It hurt, yes. Perian's betrayal hurt deeply, but along with the pain came something else. Determination. A determination not to be a victim anymore, not to let others take advantage of me. When Ruth came back, I asked her, "How soon will it start?" "It's already started," she replied contentedly. Edwin called his friend at the hotel. The first malfunctions in Perian and Delilah's room would begin tonight. I pictured them, relaxed, pleased with themselves, enjoying luxury at my expense, and how their serenity would suddenly be shattered by strange, inexplicable events. You know, I said, surprised at my own words, I'd like to see their faces when things don't go according to plan. Ruth laughed. Oh, I'm sure it will be a sight. But don't worry, Edwin promised to keep us informed. Maybe he'll even send a picture or video. How's he going to do that? He has access to the hotel security cameras. Not all the rooms, of course, but the corridors, the lobby, the restaurants. He'll be able to track how our lovebirds will react to what's going on. The thought of being able to watch retribution, albeit from a distance, filled me with a strange satisfaction. Not gloating, no. More like a sense of justice restored. What if they realize it's us? I asked suddenly. What if they realize it's us and come back to what? Ruth interrupted. To hurt you? Then they'd have to deal with me. And believe me, that's the last thing they'll want. There was such confidence in her voice that I smiled. Ruth had always been a fighter. Even now, at 75, she retained an inner strength that made those around her a force to be reckoned with. Besides, she added, they won't connect what's happening to us. They'll think it's just a series of bad luck. Perian has never been very smart, and Delilah is too narcissistic to let anyone outsmart them. She was right. My son and his wife always thought they were smarter than everyone else, especially smarter than sick old mommy, as they probably thought of me. So what now? I asked. We just wait? Exactly. Wait and get well. Ruth squeezed my hand. You have to get well, Louise. Not for them, but for yourself. You've got your whole life ahead of you. At 78? I couldn't hold back a bitter chuckle. Age is just a number. My Aunt Agatha got married at 85 and traveled around the world. Came back a year later with a tattoo and a collection of masks from Polynesia. I laughed, picturing a prim old lady with a tattoo. You're kidding. Not at all. She lived to 98 and said the last 13 years were the best years of her life. For some reason, that story gave me strength. If Aunt Agatha could start a new life at 85, I could at 78. Good, I said. I'll get well, and we'll get my money back. That's the spirit, Ruth nodded approvingly. Now get some rest. We have a lot of work to do tomorrow. What kind of work? Preparing for your discharge, moving things back to my place, talking to Dr. Morrison about a treatment plan, and, of course, keeping up with the news from Hawaii. When Ruth left, I felt something akin to hope for the first time in days. Yes, my son had betrayed me. Yes, he stole my life savings. But I'm not alone. I have a true friend willing to fight for me. And maybe I still have a chance at a new life. I slept better that night than I had in all my days in the hospital. I dreamed of Hawaii, but not of luxury hotels and beaches, but of Perian and Delilah standing confused in the middle of the street, not sure what was happening to their perfect vacation. In the morning, I was awakened by the ringing of my phone. It was Ruth, and her voice sounded excited. Louise, I have news! Operation Nightmare Vacation has begun! What's wrong? I asked sleepily, trying to focus. Edwin called. Our lovebirds had had a restless night. The air conditioner in their room accidentally turned on full blast at 3 in the morning. The temperature dropped to 15 degrees, and when they tried to turn it off, it didn't respond to the remote. We had to call a technician who, of course, found no problem. I couldn't hold back a smile as I pictured that scene. What's next? The next thing would be more fun. Today, a breakfast they didn't order would be delivered to their room, and with hot sauce. Delilah hates it, Edwin had found out. And when they refused to pay, it would be discovered that the order was in their name and number. Ruth's plan was beginning to materialize, and somewhere in Hawaii, Perian and Delilah had already run into their first trouble. They didn't know yet that this was just the beginning, that their perfect vacation would gradually turn into a real nightmare. And it was all the result of their own betrayal. I've never been to Hawaii, not once in my life. Howard and I kept putting off this trip, first for Perian's education, then for retirement. Now my son and his wife were enjoying an island paradise on my dime while I watched their vacation through Ruth and Edwin's messages. For the first 3 days after the theft, I was still in the hospital. Every morning began with news from Ruth. She would come in, sit by my bedside, and tell me with undisguised pleasure about the latest troubles that had befallen my relatives. The air conditioning was only the beginning, she said on the second day. Edwin had given them a real concert last night. A group of young musicians accidentally booked a neighboring room. They rehearsed until 2 in the morning. When Perian complained to the management, they explained that the musicians were important guests of the festival, and the hotel could not forbid them to rehearse. I imagine my son, always so sensitive to noise, trying to fall asleep to the sound of drums and electric guitars. That picture made me smile. And Delilah? I asked. How did she react? Oh, she was furious about breakfast. Turns out she's allergic to hot sauce. Not severe, but enough to cause skin irritation. She demanded compensation, but the receptionist threw up her hands. The order was placed from their room. They should have known about the composition of the dish. On the third day, Ruth brought out a clipboard and showed me the pictures Edwin had sent. The first showed Perian standing at the front desk, his face red with anger. The second showed Delilah sitting by the pool, her skin covered in red blotches from an allergic reaction. They don't suspect anything yet, Ruth said. They think they're just unlucky. But today is the second phase. Credit cards, I remembered the plan. Exactly. Edwin's already got it all set up. Tonight, when they go to dinner at the hotel restaurant, their cards will accidentally fall out of Delilah's purse. And Good Samaritan Edwin will find them and, like an honest citizen, will immediately call the bank to block them. I felt a slight prick of conscience. It was my son after all. But then I remembered his message, his cold bye, and the prick of conscience was replaced by determination. Okay, I nodded. Then what? Then they'd find themselves without credit cards at one of the most expensive resorts in the world. They'll have cash, of course, but it won't last long, especially with the way they live. I was released from the hospital on the fourth day. Dr. Morrison gave strict instructions: bed rest, minimal stress, regular medication, and weekly follow-up visits to the clinic. Ruth, as promised, took me into her home. Her house was smaller than mine, but cozier. It had 2 stories, a spacious veranda, and a garden full of flowers. Ruth gave me a guest room on the first floor so I wouldn't have to climb the stairs. "Make yourself at home," she said when we entered. "Make yourself at home." My things were already in the room: clothes, books, even a few framed photographs. Ruth had taken care of everything. "Thank you." I was touched by her concern. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "It's nothing," she said. "Now get some rest. We'll have a session with Hawaii tonight." I lay down obediently, though I felt fine. My heart was still a little jumpy, but overall I felt much better. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in a long time I didn't feel like a victim, but like someone who was fighting back. That evening, Ruth and I sat in her living room in front of a large television with a laptop connected to it. Edwin's face appeared on the screen, tanned with a white-toothed smile and sunburned hair. "Aunt Ruth," he exclaimed happily, "and Mrs. Hemmings, I'm glad to see you." "Hello, Edwin," I said. "Thank you for your help." "You're welcome. Cheaters and thieves should get what they deserve, especially those who steal from their own mother." His genuine outrage warmed my soul. It was nice to know that not all children treat their parents the way Perian treated me. "How did the credit card transaction go?" Ruth asked impatiently. "Perfectly." Edwin couldn't hide a satisfied smile. "They dined at the Azure, the most expensive restaurant in the hotel. They ordered lobster, champagne, desserts, and the bill came to $300. And when the bill came, he paused dramatically. The cards were gone. How did you arrange it? I asked. Very simple. Delilah has a small purse. She left it on the back of a chair. One of the waiters, a friend of mine, accidentally hit the chair and the purse fell. He helped pick it up, apologized, and voila, he still had the cards. What happened next? Then there was a real scene. Edwin was clearly enjoying the story. They went through the purse, all the pockets, searched the floor around the table. Nothing. The restaurant manager offered to bill the room. But his smile grew even wider. There's been a technical error. Their number is not authorized for charges. Why? I didn't understand. Because that's the way I set up the system, Edwin explained. Temporarily, of course. Normally, guests can charge restaurant and bar charges to their room account. But not this time. And what did they do? Perian paid in cash. From the look on his face, it was very painful for him. And then they went to the room and called the bank to block the cards and order new ones. But they won't send them new ones, I guessed. Exactly. The bank will send them to their home address and they're here in Hawaii. No cards, just the cash they have. How much or so can they have on them? Ruth asked. It's hard to say. Probably a few thousand. That would be enough for a week or two, considering the expenses in a hotel like this. But then they'd either have to withdraw the money from the bank, or they'd be broke, Ruth finished for him. That's right. And that's where the third stage comes in, Edwin winked. When they went to the bank to withdraw the money, they were in for a nasty surprise. The account is temporarily frozen for verification. They can call the bank and find out what's wrong, I said. They could, but it would take time, especially given the time difference. When it's day here, it's night in New York. They'd have to wait. And while they're waiting, there's a fourth step. Ruth rubbed her hands together. The hotel. Exactly, Edwin nodded. Tomorrow morning they would have a nice talk with the manager. It turned out that there was something wrong with the card they'd used to pay for their reservation. It's probably stolen. The hotel has to ask them to provide an alternative method of payment or vacate the room. What are they going to do? I asked. They have two options. Either pay cash or move out. If they pay cash, great. Their cash reserves will dwindle even faster. If they decide to move out, even better. They'd have to find a new place to live, and that's not easy in the middle of the season. The plan was flawless. Methodically, step by step, Perian and Delilah found themselves in more and more trouble. And all without direct intervention, without breaking the law, just a chain of unfortunate coincidences. What about the documents? I asked, remembering the fifth step of the plan. That's the next step, Edwin answered. But first we'll see how they react to the problems with the hotel. If they decide to flee, great. We'll intercept them at the airport. If they stay, we'll do the paperwork. The next day, Edwin sent a video. It showed Perian and Delilah standing at the check-in counter. Perian was arguing loudly with the receptionist, waving his arms. Delilah stood next to him, her face a mixture of anger and fear. They're trying to convince the hotel that there's nothing wrong with their card, Edwin commented over the phone. But the receptionist is adamant. Either an alternative method of payment or eviction. What did they decide? Ruth asked. They haven't decided yet. They're taking a time out until tonight. They'll probably try the bank. In the evening, a new message came from Edwin. They're staying at the hotel, paid cash a week in advance. That's almost all their cash. Moving on to the paperwork stage. The next morning, I felt well enough to go out into the garden. Ruth helped me settle into a chaise lounge and brought me tea and a tablet. Edwin promised to be in touch at 10, she said, sitting down beside me. Today is the big day. At exactly 10 o'clock, the screen of the tablet came to life and Edwin's face appeared on it. Good morning, ladies. He said hello. I have great news. Operation Disappeared Documents was a success. How did you do it? Ruth asked. Very simple. The maid cleaning their room had accidentally left the safe open. When they came back from the beach and discovered it, the passports and return tickets were gone. Did they report it to the front desk? I asked. Of course. They're looking into it right now. But you see, it's a very delicate situation. The hotel doesn't want to admit that their employee may have been involved in the theft. It's bad for their reputation. So they're suggesting that maybe the guest left the documents somewhere or worse, sold them. Sold them? I was surprised. American passports are worth good money on the black market. So the version that the tourists, finding themselves without money, decided to sell the documents is not so improbable. So what now? Ruth asked. Now they're trapped. Without the documents, they can't go home. Without the money, they can't continue living in an expensive hotel. And then there are the police. The police? I asked you again. Yes, I anonymously reported to the police that there was a couple staying at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel who might be involved in a financial fraud. I didn't give details, but I hinted that there was a large sum involved. The police are interested. Will they come to them? I felt a little uneasy. After all, the police are serious. Not right away. They'll check with the hotel first. But that'll put more pressure on them. Perian and Delilah would know the police were interested in them, and that would make them even more nervous. The plan worked even better than we expected. In a matter of days, my son and his wife went from carefree vacationers to suspects with no money and no ID, all as a result of their own actions. When do you plan to intervene? Ruth asked. Offer them a way out? Not yet, Edwin shook his head. Let them simmer in their own juices for a few more days. The more desperate their situation, the more willing they will be to accept my help. And my terms. All day long, I have not been able to find a place to sit. Despite my resentment and anger, I was still worried about my son. What if this goes too far? What if the police actually arrested them? Ruth noticed my concern. Do you regret our plan? She asked me bluntly. No. I shook my head. It's just, he is my son after all. The son who stole your money and left you to die in the hospital. Ruth reminded me harshly. Don't forget that. She was right. Perian had made his choice. Now he must face the consequences. In the evening, Edwin contacted again. This time he seemed excited. You won't believe what has happened, he exclaimed. They tried to escape from the hotel without paying. What? Ruth and I were on the same page. Yes! They packed up and tried to leave quietly through the service entrance, but they were spotted by security. They're in the staff room now, and the hotel has called the police. Oh my God, I whispered. Are they going to be arrested? Not necessarily, Edwin shrugged. If they pay for the room, the hotel might not press charges, but they have almost no money left as far as I know. What's going to happen next? Ruth asked. I think now would be a good time for me to show up, Edwin winked. I'll happen to be there when the police are talking to them, and I'll offer to help. What kind of help? I asked. I'll say that I can help settle the situation with the hotel and the police. Maybe even help with the paperwork, but not for free, of course. Would they agree? I doubted it. Perian was always stubborn. They won't have a choice, Edwin said confidently. They're cornered. No money, no papers, with the police on their tail. Any way out will be their salvation. After my conversation with Edwin, I couldn't sleep for a long time. Everything that had happened seemed unreal. 2 weeks ago, I was just a lonely old woman, visited occasionally by my son, begging for money. Now I was involved in a real retaliation operation. In the morning, Ruth woke me up early. Louise, get up. Edwin's on the phone. I hurried into the living room, where Ruth's nephew's face was already on the TV screen. Good morning, he said hello. I have exciting news. They've agreed. To what exactly? I asked. My terms. I introduced myself to them as someone who could solve problems. I told them I had heard about their situation from the hotel staff and offered to help. What were your terms? I want my money back, all $200,000. In return, I promised to settle with the hotel, help them recover their documents, and make sure they got home safely. And they agreed? I still couldn't believe it. Not right away, Edwin admitted. At first, Perian tried to bargain. He offered half the money, but I was adamant. It was all or nothing. And he gave in? Yes, but it wasn't him. It was Delilah. She literally forced him to take it, screamed that she wasn't going to sit in a Hawaiian prison because he was stubborn, That was just like Delilah. She always thought of herself first. How will they get the money back? Ruth asked. They don't have access to the account. They don't, but I do, Edwin said with a sly smile. I helped them contact their bank. They gave me all the details, including passwords. Now the money is being transferred back into Mrs. Hemmings' account. All 200,000? I asked. Minus 20,000, Edwin corrected. That's what they've already spent. Tickets, hotel, restaurants, 20,000 for the week. They were really living large. But 180,000 is on its way, Edwin assured him. I got confirmation from the bank. The money should be in your account within 24 hours. What will happen to it? I asked, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and pity. I'll keep my word, Edwin said gravely. I'll take care of the hotel and the paperwork. They can go home, but I don't think it will be the most pleasant flight of their lives. Did they realize that we were behind it? Ruth asked. I don't think so. I introduced myself as a private security consultant. I said I often help tourists in distress. They were so scared they didn't ask any questions. After talking to Edwin, I went out into the garden. The day was clear, sunny. Ruth's flowers filled the air with fragrance. I took a deep breath and felt a calm inside. I didn't feel gloating or triumphant, more like peace. Justice had been served. It wasn't perfect. I'd lost 20,000, and much more importantly, I'd finally lost my son. But I had gotten most of my money back, and more importantly, I had regained my dignity. Ruth came out into the garden and sat down beside me. What are you thinking about? She asked me. About what will happen next, I answered honestly. What do you want to happen next? I thought. For the first time in a long time, I could decide my own fate. Not looking back at Perian, not trying to save a relationship that never really existed. I want a fresh start, I finally said. Maybe sell the house in Greenville. Too many bad memories. That's a good idea, said Ruth. Where would you like to move? I don't know. Maybe. I smiled at the sudden thought. Maybe Hawaii? Ruth laughed. Why not? Edwin would love it. And I could use a change of scenery too. Would you come with me? I was touched. Of course you would. Someone has to keep you out of trouble. We both knew it was a joke. But there was some truth in it. Ruth did look after me. Not as a helpless old woman, but as a true friend. In the evening, I got a message from the bank. $180,000 had been deposited into my account. The money's back. What are you going to do with it? Ruth asked when I showed her the message. First, I'll put it aside for medical treatment, I said. Then maybe some of it for traveling. I've always wanted to see the world. Shall we start with Hawaii? Ruth's eyes twinkled with mischief. We'll start with Hawaii, I agreed. But first we must wait for Perian and Delilah to leave the island. I wouldn't want to run into them. Oh, don't worry, Ruth said with a wave of her hand. Edwin will make sure they leave as soon as possible. And I don't think they'll ever want to go back to Hawaii again. Too many unpleasant memories. We laughed. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. Not just existing, but living life to the fullest with plans and dreams and hopes. During the night, I received a phone call from Edwin. Mrs. Hemmings, he said. They're leaving tomorrow morning. I'd booked them on a 3-way economy ticket. It was the cheapest I could find. Thank you, Edwin, I said sincerely, for everything you've done. You're welcome. It was educational. I could hear the smile in his voice. And if you haven't changed your mind about moving, I've already looked at a couple of places. Small houses on the coast, overlooking the ocean. I think you'll like it. After I talked to Edwin, I lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, Perian and Delilah will leave Hawaii. Their perfect vacation turned into a nightmare. They would return home without the money they had stolen, with a tarnished reputation and an unpleasant residue. Did I feel satisfaction? Yes, definitely, but not gloating. I didn't want to hurt them, just justice. And I got it. And now it was time to move on. Without Perian and Delilah in my life. Without the constant guilt and obligation to a son who never appreciated me. With a loyal friend who proved that true family wasn't always about blood ties. There was a new life ahead. And perhaps a new home in Hawaii where my son and his wife would never appear again. It had been 3 months since Perian and Delilah had returned from Hawaii. 3 months of relative peace. I say relative because I haven't had real peace in my life in a long time. A lot has changed in that time. My health had improved dramatically. Regular visits to the cardiologist, the right medications, and most importantly, the lack of constant stress had done its job. I was still living with Ruth in her guest room, which was slowly becoming mine. My house in Greenville was empty. I couldn't bring myself to go back there. Too many heavy memories. I only heard about Perian and Delilah from neighbors who called occasionally to give me news. According to them, my son and his wife came back from Hawaii, kind of weird, depressed, nervous, fighting all the time. I felt no satisfaction at this news. Rather, I was saddened by the realization that our relationship had finally broken down. "Your lawyer called," said Ruth, coming into the room with a cup of tea. "Minus Mr. Burrows. Said he had some news." James Burrows was an old friend of Ruth's, an experienced lawyer specializing in financial crimes. We approached him after my money was returned to see what our legal options were. "What did he say?" I asked, taking the cup. "Just that he wanted to meet." He sounded agitated. We arranged to meet the next day. Mr. Barrows arrived at our house, a tall, lean man with attentive eyes and graying temples. "Mrs. Hemmings," he shook my hand. "I have some interesting news. The Greenville police have contacted the Honolulu police." "What?" "I didn't see that coming." "Why?" "About the passport theft report your son and daughter-in-law filed in Hawaii. It's standard procedure when American citizens are victims of crime overseas. The information is forwarded to their hometown." "And now what?" "Now a detective from Greenville wants to talk to you about a financial transaction your son made." I felt a chill run down my spine. The police, after all. That's exactly what I was afraid of. "Do I have to talk to them?" I asked, looking at Ruth. "Technically, no," Mr. Burrows answered. "You don't have to, but if you refuse, it might arouse suspicion." "What kind of suspicion?" Ruth frowned. "Louise is the victim here." "Yes, but the situation is, unusual." The lawyer chose his words carefully. "The money disappeared from Mrs. Hemmings's account, then came back. Your son and his wife are claiming identity theft in Hawaii. This whole thing seems strange." "What am I supposed to do?" I felt lost. "I recommend you see a detective," said Mr. Burrows. "In my presence, of course. Tell the truth, that your son took the money without authorization while you were in the hospital, and that he returned it afterwards, realizing his mistake." "But that's not quite the truth," I objected. "He didn't realize the mistake. He was forced to." "We can leave out the details," the lawyer said softly. "The main thing is that the money was returned and you have no claim on your son. I didn't like the idea of lying to the police, even if it was for the greater good, but I understood Mr. Burrows' logic. The truth was too complicated and confusing." "Okay," I finally agreed. "When does the detective want to meet?" "Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., Greenville Police Station." I didn't sleep much last night. The thought of meeting the police, of having to talk about Perian's betrayal, kept me awake. In the morning, I felt broken, but determined. Ruth insisted on coming with me. We met Mr. Burrows at the entrance to the police station. "Remember," he said before we entered, "just the facts. Your son took the money without authorization, then gave it back. No emotion, no details about exactly how it happened. Detective Higgins turned out to be a young man with a friendly face and attentive eyes. He invited us into a small office and offered us coffee. "Mrs. Hemmings," he began as we settled in, "thank you for agreeing to meet. I have some questions about your son, Perian Hemmings, and his wife, Delilah Hemmings." "I'm ready to answer," I said, trying to make my voice sound confident. "I have received information from the Honolulu Police Department. Your son and his wife reported their passports and credit cards stolen while they were in Hawaii. Were you aware of that?" "Yes," I answered. "They told me when they got back. It was the first lie, and it was a hard one for me to tell. Perian hadn't really called or come to see me after he got back. He probably didn't even know where I lived now." During the investigation, it turned out that shortly before the trip, a large sum of money was withdrawn from an account registered in your name, about $200,000. This money was transferred to your son's account. Can you explain that?" I took a deep breath and looked at Mr. Barrows. He nodded faintly. "Yes," I said. "My son took the money without my permission while I was in the hospital, but then he gave it back. Without your permission? The detective raised his eyebrows. So it was theft? I wouldn't call it theft, I said slowly. It was more of a misunderstanding. Perian thought he had the right to handle my finances while I was ill. And you didn't report it to the police? Nunuptu. He returned the money and I thought the incident was over. Detective Higgins made a note in his notebook. Mrs. Hemmings, let me get this straight. Your son took $200,000 from your account without authorization, spent some of that money on a trip to Hawaii, and then returned the rest. And you consider that a misunderstanding? When he phrased the situation so bluntly, it did sound absurd. But I stuck to the agreed-upon version. Yes, we resolved it within the family. Good. The detective was clearly not satisfied with my answer, but decided to move on. Now about the theft in Hawaii. Do you have any information about that? Only what my son told me, I lied again. Their files and cards were stolen from the hotel safe. And don't you think it's a strange coincidence that shortly after your son took your money without authorization, he was robbed in Hawaii? I hadn't thought about that, I said, avoiding a direct answer. Detective Higgins looked at me for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Ruth and Mr. Burroughs. Mrs. Hemmings, I'll be frank with you. This story seems very strange. Your son takes a large sum of money without authorization, goes to Hawaii, gets ripped off, but somehow he pays you back and comes home. Are you sure you've told me everything? Detective, Mr. Burroughs interjected. My client has answered your questions. If you have reason to believe a crime has been committed, please formulate a charge. Otherwise, I see no reason to continue this conversation. Detective Higgins leaned back in his chair. No charges at this time, but the investigation is ongoing. We have yet to receive a full report from Honolulu. That concluded our meeting. When we left the precinct, I felt drained. You did a great job, Mr. Burroughs said, but the detective didn't believe our story. What's going to happen now? I asked. The police will continue their investigation. They might want to talk to your son, or the staff at the hotel in Hawaii. But without your report of the theft, they'll have a hard time pressing charges against Perian. I nodded, feeling oddly relieved. I didn't want my son to end up in jail, despite everything he'd done, but I didn't want to continue my relationship with him either. A week after our visit to the police, Mr. Burroughs called with the news. Detective Higgins contacted me again, he said. They got the information from the Honolulu police. It seems your son and his wife are in serious trouble. What's wrong? I felt my heart start to beat faster. The Royal Hawaiian Hotel has filed fraud charges against them. Apparently, they tried to leave without paying the bill. But that's not true, I exclaimed. They paid cash a week in advance. That's right. But then they tried to check out early without telling the front desk. According to hotel policy, that's considered an attempt to evade payment. So what now? They're facing a fine and possible legal action, but that's not all. The bank has also initiated an investigation into a $200,000 transaction. They consider the transaction suspicious. I closed my eyes. The situation was spiraling out of control. What started out as a plan to get my money back was turning into a serious legal matter with unpredictable consequences. Minus Mr. Burroughs, I said after a pause. I want to tell the whole truth. What? He clearly didn't see that coming. The whole truth. About how Perian stole my money, about the message he sent me, about the photo from Delilah, how Ruth and her nephew helped me get my money back. But Mrs. Hemmings, this could have serious consequences. I know, but I can't lie anymore. It's not me, it's not my character. Mr. Burroughs was silent for a long time, then sighed. All right, if you're sure. But I must warn you, your son and his wife could get real prison sentences for financial fraud. I understand, I said firmly. But they have to take responsibility for their actions. The next day, we met with Detective Higgins again. This time, I told him everything about how Perian and Delilah had visited me in the hospital, how they'd found information about my savings, how they'd stolen the money and flown to Hawaii. I showed their messages and the picture Delilah had sent. And then, I continued, my friend Ruth contacted her nephew Edwin, who lives in Hawaii. He helped complicate Perian and Delilah's vacation. Complicate? The detective interjected. An inconvenience. Nothing illegal, I added hastily. Just Service disruptions, problems with the air conditioning with restaurant orders. And then Edwin offered them a deal, a refund in exchange for help with the paperwork and getting home. Detective Higgins listened with an impenetrable face. And they accepted. Yes, they were in a desperate situation. No money, no papers, with the police interested in their case. The detective made a note in his notebook. Mrs. Hemmings, what you're telling me is very serious. Your son and his wife committed financial fraud, and the actions of your friend and her nephew. Let's just say they're in the gray area of the law. I understand, I nodded, and I'm willing to take responsibility for my actions, but I want the truth to be known. I appreciate your honesty, the detective said after a pause, and I'll take it into account in my report. But I must warn you that your son and his wife are likely to face serious legal consequences. I understand, I repeated, and I accept it. As we left the station, Ruth took my hand. Are you sure you did the right thing? She asked. Absolutely, I answered. I couldn't go on living a lie, and Perian must realize that his actions have consequences. That same day, Perian called me, for the first time in 3 months. Mom? His voice sounded strained. The police were at my place. They asked questions about the money, about the trip to Hawaii. What's going on? What had to happen, Perian? I answered calmly. The truth came out. What did you tell them? I could hear the panic in his voice. The truth. That you stole my money while I was in the hospital. That you and Delilah went to Hawaii and sent me a picture of you laughing at a sick old woman. Mom, that's not what happened. We just... Stop it, Perian, I interrupted him. I saw the messages. I saw the picture. I saw what you wrote. We flew away with all your money. Bye. It was a joke. There was desperation in his voice. We were going to return the money. We were. I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. And when? After we'd spent it all on a luxury vacation? Mom, you don't understand. You don't know what we went through in Hawaii. It was a nightmare. Someone was following us, making trouble. I know, Perian, I said calmly. I know everything. There was a long pause. Was it you? He finally squeezed out. Were you behind all this? Not me. Ruth and her nephew Edwin, but with my consent. You set us up. His voice broke into a scream. My own son! And you stole money from your own mother while she was in the hospital, I countered. Which is worse, Perian? I don't believe it, he said quietly, as if in shock. I don't believe you could do such a thing. And I didn't believe you were capable of betrayal. But we were both wrong, weren't we? What happens now? He asked after a pause. I don't know. The police and the court will decide. A trial? Panic was back in his voice. Mom, you're not going to sue me, are you? I've already testified, Perian. It's in the hands of the law now. You can't do this. I am your son. The son who saw me only as a purse. The son who was happy to steal my money. The son who didn't even call to check on me after he got back from Hawaii. He didn't say a word. There was nothing to say for himself. Goodbye, Perian, I said and hung up. Ruth found me in the garden where I was sitting looking at the flowers. Are you all right? She asked, sitting down beside me. Yes, I answered, and it was true. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free? From guilt. From having to pretend that Perian and I had a normal relationship. From the constant pain of his neglect. Ruth took my hand. What do you want to do next? What we talked about. Sell the house in Greenville. Start a new life. In Hawaii? Ruth has a mischievous twinkle in her eye. Why not? I smiled. Edwin said he'd found great options for us. 2 weeks later, the official notice from the police came. Perian and Delilah were charged with financial fraud and grand larceny. They faced up to 5 years in prison. Mr. Burroughs called me to discuss the situation. There is a possibility of leniency, he said. If you, as the injured party, make a motion for leniency, I wondered. Did I want Perian to go to prison? Number, but did I want him to escape punishment? Also number. What do you propose, I asked. Probation instead of a real sentence. Restitution. In your case, that's already happened. And community service. What does the prosecutor think? He's inclined to agree, given that the money's been returned and Perian has no criminal record. But he needs your consent. After much deliberation, I've decided to accept probation for Perian and Delilah. Not out of pity for them, but because prison would hardly make them better. But probation, community service, and the stigma of being financial fraudsters might have made them think twice about their actions. A month later, the trial took place. I attended, though it was hard to see my son in the courtroom, to hear him referred to as the defendant. Perian and Delilah pleaded guilty to all charges. The judge, taking into account my motion and their lack of criminal records, sentenced them to 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service. After the hearing, Perian tried to approach me, but I shook my head and left the room. Our conversation was over the day he sent me his gloating message. 3 months later, my house in Greenville was sold. I got a good price for it. The real estate market was booming. That money, along with my savings, allowed me to do what I had dreamed of doing: buy a small house in Hawaii within walking distance of the ocean. Ruth, as promised, moved in with me. We bought neighboring houses in a small coastal community near Honolulu. Edwin lived half an hour away and visited us often. My new life was not what I had envisioned at 78. Instead of a lonely existence in a big, empty house filled with memories of failed motherhood, I lived in a sunny place, surrounded by true friends who cared for me not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. Sometimes, sitting on the veranda of my new home and watching the sunset over the ocean, I thought of Perian, not with bitterness or anger, but with sad understanding. My son had made his choice, choosing money over relationships, choosing short-term gain over long-term connections, and I finally accepted that fact. Stop trying to change what couldn't be changed. "What are you thinking about?" Ruth asked, sitting down beside me on the veranda. "About life," I said. "About how strangely it turns." "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "Perian. About the way things turned out." I looked out at the ocean, at the setting sun painting the sky shades of pink and gold, at the palm trees swaying in the breeze. "I wish I'd done it sooner," I said honestly. "I wish I'd broken off the toxic relationship, started living for myself." Ruth smiled and squeezed my hand. "Better late than never." "Exactly," I smiled back. "Better late than never." Somewhere in Greenville, Perian and Delilah were serving their probation, doing community service, maybe reflecting on their actions, or maybe they weren't. It didn't matter to me anymore. I closed that chapter of my life and opened a new one, bright, full of light and warmth, without those who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. At 79, I had finally found what many had been searching for all my life: inner peace and a true family, even if not bound by blood. And it was worth all the struggles I had gone through.